No, man, but you got to keep going. What am I going to do, quit? That's not an option. You got to keep on keeping on. Life's a garden, dig it. You make it work for you. You never give up, man. That's my philosophy.
Tomatoes, tomatoes, tomatoes. Hello, gardeners. Hope you're all having a great week in your gardens. I'm looking at my project for today. I've got all of these different tomato varieties here growing. We've got tons of awesome tomatoes here. Everything looking really nice, really healthy. But I've got to get all of these transplanted. As you can tell, they are more than ready to get out of these cells here. So let's get growing. All right. Welcome, all of my garden enthusiasts and passionate plant people. Welcome to the Sunday edition of Let's Get Growing, your weekend gardening live cast here on the Urban Gardener channel. I'm Enoch. I am your host today. I'm so glad to have all of you along with me. And yeah, we're off to a great start. It looks like I played the introduction for yesterday's show instead of today's, but that's all right. We are up and running today on our Sunday edition of the show. And again, I'm really glad to have all of you here with me. So be sure to stick with us here for in a little bit. We'll have joining with us on our Sunday edition. It is the second Sunday of the month, and joining us is Scott Wilson from the Gardener Scott channel to answer all of your gardening questions. So be sure to stay tuned here a little bit later in the show, and we'll have Gardener Scott joining with us here. We've got a lot to talk with them about, lots of things growing on in our gardens. And again, if you are here joining with us right now, be sure click that like button, hit the thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. Keep on subscribing if you haven't already. Looks like, as I talked about yesterday, we just passed 15,000 subscribers on our channel now. So how about that? What a great milestone to reach, and further to go. If all of you can jump in and share our videos and live streams with all of your gardening friends, your gardening groups, and all of that out there. Let people know what we've got growing on here on the weekends at the Let's Get Growing show. So definitely do that. Help us keep growing this audience. That's our real big goal this year, is to grow the audience and have some great shows here on the weekends, both Saturday and Sunday here at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on the Urban Gardener channel. So definitely do that. And also, as we always do at the top of the show, a big, huge shout out to all of you who are watching on our replay. Awesome to have all of you here with us later in the week. And if you are joining with us on the replay, definitely get down into the comment section below. Let me know that you are here. Let me know what you got growing on. Let me know if you got any questions, comments, or suggestions for the show. I'd love to hear from all of you. And of course, we would love to have you ask any questions or comments right in our chat box there, and especially when we get our guest on here later on the show, because this is answering all of your garden questions. So be sure to bring those garden questions for our guest Gardener Scott here in a little bit, and we will try to feature those during our discussion. So definitely do that. And also be sure to go back and check out some of our previous shows. We are having such a great season so far. We've had some really phenomenal guests on our show. And that was definitely the case last Saturday when we had Linda Vodder on the show from Garden Inspired Life on YouTube. Linda Vodder has a really great channel, and was just such an awesome interview. So definitely go back and check that out, as well as last week's Sunday edition. We had with us Rachel Andorfer from Oxheart Gardening joining with us to talk all about getting our gardens ready for the new growing season. So that was a really fun conversation, and it was great to have Rachel back as she was a guest on our show last season. And also too, yesterday was a really great show ultimately. However, we were supposed to feature Professor Kathy Martin from Norfolk Plant Sciences to talk all about the new purple tomato that was introduced to home gardeners, but she ended up canceling, and we had to move forward with our Are You Following Me guest as our featured guest. We had a really wonderful and fun conversation with Nicole Smith from Nicole Smith Gardening. It was just really great. Again, all of our conversations here are just really awesome, really wonderful. We have so many really great people joining with us each and every weekend, both Saturday and Sunday here on the show. So you don't want to miss out on any of our shows. And if you have, definitely go back and check them out because they are some really fun, great conversations. And let's see here. Let's jump in and see who we got joining with us today. Yep. Got Rick joining with us. He's at 3, which I think right now would be 4 a.m. in Sydney, Australia. So awesome for you to join with us, Rick, here so early in the morning from Sydney, Australia. That's really, really awesome. And of course, we do have with us our moderator, the best moderator in YouTube, Jay Dixon, joining us from Ontario, Canada. Awesome. Thank you, Jay, for all that you do for our show. And let's see here. We've got Serena saying hi to everybody there. Awesome to have you here with us, Serena. Thank you so much. So and Tear, awesome. Great to have you here with us in the audience. Big Will Dog. Definitely. He's joining us for a little bit. Got to go do some yard cleanup. A tree branch fell. Oh boy, must have had some high winds or something like that recently. I know Jay was talking about that in her area in Canada yesterday too. So I don't know, maybe that was a big issue for some folks there around the world. But hopefully all is okay. We got Val joining with us here. Hey, good morning, y'all, from sunny northern Arizona. Breezy today, no rain in sight. Awesome. Yeah. Down in Arizona. Excellent. Let's see here. John Jude joining with us. Hey, from Spring Lake, Ohio. He says, agree, Gardener Scott knows maybe everything garden. That's right. Gardener Scott is our go-to guy when it comes to knowing what we need to know when it comes to what we've got growing on in our gardens. So, oh yeah, and John says, well, to get it right there. Yep. Shout out Jay Dixon. You just might be the best helpful person on YouTube. Thanks. That's absolutely correct. So awesome. So wonderful to have Jay be our moderator here and help us out. And as we're discussing things, she always puts great links and everything into our comment section there as we're talking. So it's really wonderful and helps keep our conversation moving along during the show. So really, really helpful, really, really awesome. And thank you all so much for joining with us today. Really great to have you here. Looks like we got Dusty Flats back with us again too. It's hot outside today and freezing by weekend. Hello, everyone. Hello. Yeah. Well, it's that time of year, right? I mean, spring. Sometimes we can get those really warm, really hot days. I've been kind of dealing with this over this last week, and definitely looks like that's what our next week is actually going to be like as well, too. We get these really nice warm days, and then it starts to get really cool during the night because it's still kind of, it's that in-between season between winter and summer. So, it's that season where we're making that adjustment from cold to nice and hot, and especially in my area, that's what it's definitely like. And But what I'm also noticing though too, a little bit different than what we had this time last year. This time last year, it was very much what you were talking about. It was really freezing nights, really warm days. We're getting some pretty cool nights here in Southern Oregon, but they're not dipping to frost risk. So, and I don't see that as well into our 10-day forecast. But then again, my last frost date's still about another month away for our area. And I'm looking at the 10-day forecast and I'm seeing, it's getting warmer and warmer. And the overnights may be a little cool, but they're not that cool, as far as worrying about frost. So I'm kind of thinking, hey, you know what? Let's start getting things planted out there. But I warn people, this is the trick nature can play on us sometimes, is thinking everything's great, everything's okay. We look at the forecast, it's nice and warm, and then we go and get all of those nice warm season crops started and planted out into our garden. And then next thing you know, nature throws us a curveball, and and then we get this freeze, frost starts to hit, and all these sort of dangers to our gardens start to happen. Now, if you are in a situation where you can protect against some of this frost, you can protect your plants against some of that stuff, then maybe you might just jump in and go ahead. And that's if that's the case, if you got the time, if you got the ability to do the things that needs to be done in order to protect your plants during that certain time, then that's definitely a good idea to to get your garden started as early as possible. In my thoughts, especially when it comes to my tomatoes, I'm going to wait maybe another week and a half. And then if my 10-day forecast looks good from that point, then I'm going to go ahead and go. I'm going to go ahead and drop those in. I'm going to start getting them out, making sure my soil temperature is all great. And if that's all right, then we're good to go. And if anything does happen, I will just take the time. I'll get out there, cover them, get them protected from the frost possibilities, and then make sure that I'm also getting a nice start on my plants. So there's a real kind of give and take when it comes to what, how we're dealing with this time of year when it gets to getting those warmer season crops going. We're going to talk a little bit more about cooler season stuff here in just a little bit when we get our guest gardener Scott on, and we'll talk about some of that sort of stuff as well too. Maybe we'll touch a little bit on how this kind of season affects a lot of us. And as you can tell in the chat, a lot of us are from a lot of different places. We've got someone from Arizona all the way to up into Ontario, Canada, all the way on the other side of the globe in Australia, so we all are dealing with lots of different things at this point in time. But, depending on where you are and what part of your season and all of that, then you might be thinking about what you're doing. And especially for those of you, and I mentioned Australia, and I wasn't thinking about it when I said it though, too. I mean, for Australia, you're getting the opposite probably happening. Things are probably getting cooler and cooler for you as you're heading into your winter. We're all heading towards summer here, and everybody down in Australia, they've had their growing season. It's pretty much fall for them right now, and they're moving towards their winter season. So it's always interesting to kind of think about those things, those sort of differences in what we're all dealing with. But for the most part, we will be dealing with our spring gardening season here on the show. And we'll touch on a lot of that here with our guest coming up. Real quick, before we get started with our first segment, I wanted to touch on this real quick. I saw this article the other day. Let's see if I can pop this up here real quick. And I thought it to be really interesting because I've heard about this before. Let's see here. The article is the one vegetable you should never store next to potatoes. And, and I'd heard about this before. And when I read the headline, I was thinking onions, and I got it. Onions are one of these things that when you put them next to your potatoes, apples, things like that, it can really increase their ripening and can really get them to, potatoes, to kind of start growing eyes and all of that sort of stuff. But when I was reading this article about this, I thought it's interesting that that's kind of how it works, with that situation, and that you could, get your potatoes to grow eyes faster. And that's where kind of my mind went when I was thinking about this, was that if that's the case, then maybe, you don't want to just generally store them next to each other, but maybe that's a method you could use if you're just a little late in getting potatoes, or if you're trying to encourage them to to get started to grow those eyes, that sort of thing, so that you can get them out in your garden and grow and all of that too, especially if you're trying and experimenting with growing, say, different potato varieties that you get from your organic section of your supermarket and all of that. I've done that. I've grown them, and I've grown some really great potatoes doing that. But I thought that was kind of an interesting point of view and thought when it comes to it, that maybe, in general, it's probably not a good idea to store your newly harvested potatoes and that sort of thing. But if you are trying to encourage your potatoes to get growing for the gardening season, then maybe that's a method you would do. Maybe that's something that would work in the garden. So maybe that's something you could check out or try if you're looking to get your potatoes started in the growing season. And definitely a question we'll think about asking Gardener Scott a little bit later on here as we get going. But just one moment here, and we'll be right back with our in the garden segment with our friend Mark Lachey Colbert. Hey gardeners, thanks for tuning in to our show today. We'll be right back at it here in just a moment. I just wanted to take a second here to highlight our regular videos and features here on the Urban Gardener channel. Our weekly garden journals, and our incredible featured visits. All right. Let's see what our good friend Mark has growing on in the garden.
Hey guys, this is a garden. I'm MBC, so that must mean you're in the garden with MBC. Welcome back for another one of these MBC in the garden segments, where I try to just take something that I'm doing in my own gardening practice and let you see the steps or the reasons why I'm doing it or how I'm doing it, the technique, and hopefully that'll be a stimulus for some of your own creativity and maybe some discussion on the chat of this program or such. Anyway, right now what I'm working on is I'm making some tags, some durable, easy to read tags for all my gardening efforts this summer. I'm actually here at my school garden at Franciscan Montessori Earth School in Portland, Oregon. And as you can see, the weather's fine. It's been good for a while. I realize some of you are still landlocked and snowed in and such. This is a great activity to do any time of the year, but especially when you're itching to get out in the garden, but you can't plant yet. Good indoor activity. Good thing you can do undercover or in a garage. And I'm going to take you through some of the failed tags that I've used over the last few years to show you how I got to this and how I'm making these and what I'm expecting from them this year. First of all, let's just have a word about tags in general, right? I've got one of the smallest possible tags here, just this small little plastic tag. But any tag is valuable because it communicates information. I've been doing a lot of tomato transplanting, for example, and shortly after you seed tomatoes, after they leave the package and then they come up, you can't tell one from another. Now there's certain leaf differences, and some have what's called a potato leaf, and some are more typical, what we think of as a tomato leaf, lobed and kind of, you know, with a multi-leaflet pattern. But most of them have that latter pattern. It's hard to tell the difference as they come up. But if you haven't tagged things, you're in big trouble, because it's going to take you till fruiting to get the sense of whether you have a cherry tomato or a beefsteak, right? Or maybe not quite that far, but you'll have to wait a long time. You may never get the actual variety. You may lose the information on the variety. Same thing with all kinds of other things you're going to plant in your garden. If you don't make a tag, if you're not at least getting the information down somewhere in the garden, you're kind of at sea in terms of, is this crop growing well or not, and why? You want to know the information. So in general, any kind of record keeping is going to be valuable in a notebook, pictures on your phone, voice memos on your phone. But I like visual tags in the garden, because as I wander around the garden, I like to be able to know what's going on. Also, you may know I'm a gardener at Noble Rot Restaurant, a rooftop garden at the Noble Rot in Portland, Oregon. And there I have a lot of chefs who are harvesting all the time the stuff that I've planted. I'm not there. So it's important to let them know what it is that is planted in the garden. And part of the reason for this kind of a tag is that it's big, bright, calls attention to itself, and is easy to label and easy for all to read and find. So that's what I'm shooting for. I'm shooting for max clarity, max communication, both with others like my chefs, with visitors to the garden, and also with myself, because I forget what I've planted, right? Believe me, despite all my garden years of experience, decades of garden years of experience, decades of years, I guess getting redundant, but I have hoed things that were just coming up thinking they were weeds, forgetting I had planted something. Not putting the proper tags can lead to all kinds of costly mistakes. And then also just planted things and never really known what variety it was all through the season, because I lost the info. So hopefully that's a strong enough case for making tags. Now let's talk about the evolution of the tags that I've used over the last few years, and why I think I've finally come up with a superior tag that's easy to make at home. First of all, as I said, any tag is important, but of all the important tags, this one is the most garbage. This is a little plastic tag that is bound to get plucked out, blown away, snapped into whatever. You're so likely to lose this tag. You do not want to depend on this little tag. It is most likely the size tag you will get in your pot when you buy a plant. And I also use these for all my potting, even though I don't really like plastic. But this stands up to the moisture of the pot better than any other alternative that I've tried in wood. So I'm still using some of these plastic tags. I do try to avoid plastic in general, but your chances are you're going to get one of these if you buy any kind of potted plant. You must immediately transfer this information to something else. Please don't let this be your only tag. You're going to lose it. You're going to be missing the info. It's just going to go away. I have tried larger plastic tags. It's like a, 4-fold size increase from this guy. But again, plastic is destined to break down in the garden. Ultraviolet rays are going to beat down on this, and sooner or later, first it will fade, second it will crack, and then you've added to the waste stream. So again, like I don't want to be adding things like this to the waste stream. I don't want more plastic in my life. I don't need more plastic. The planet doesn't need more plastic. Let's try to get away from that. You can buy simple, pre-made, pre-cut wooden tags with these guys have rotted, so that there's an obvious defect in just straight up untreated wood. But in terms of eco sensibilities, writing with a pencil on untreated wood, you're going to get your best results. And you can buy these en masse at various garden supply stores by the box. What I was noticing though is, even with a little bit of sunlight on the tag, and I was using a Sharpie marker, the writing would fade. Chefs couldn't see it, and the wood itself gets pretty dark. So I upgraded a little bit to a bright yellow pre-painted wooden tag. That looked good out of the box. It definitely had high contrast when you wrote on it, but eventually it would break down too. And some of that yellow paint was coming off in the dirt. I wasn't too excited about that. Basically got one season out of these and then tossed them too. So I was looking to combine some of this benefit of wood with something a little bit more durable and something that I could easily make. I purchased at a big box store a package of lath. These are 4-foot strips, maybe a 1/4 inch wide, 2 inches wide and a 1/4 inch thick, and they come in a package of 50. I sawed them in half to make my 2-foot stakes. To me, a 2-foot stake is a great size for, it gives you enough leverage to jam it into the soil and plenty of room for writing. Now this would be the most basic version and you could just go straight with this. I do recommend sanding them because with a marker, it's hard to write on clearly on an irregular surface. So I got some 80 grit sandpaper here, and first I'll just take down the corners and just so I don't get a bunch of splinters when I'm driving them into the soil, and then just flatten the faces. Sandpaper is a great eraser too when it's time to change up the crops from one year to the next. Oftentimes if I'm writing on a plain surface, wooden surface, I'll just give it a sanding at the beginning of the season. If I'm doing a lot, of course, I'll have a power tool, a palm sander or something, but this little piece of sandpaper works great. I was just working with my students these last few days making these, and sanding with them was just a great therapeutic activity. They love doing it. It's a great chance to get them in touch with a little basic part of woodworking, and they take pride in getting the thing nice and smooth. So it's great to do with kids. It's also just some great handwork to do if you have the time. If you want to speed it up, use a machine. The next thing I'm going to do though, because obviously anytime bare wood is in contact with soil, there is going to be the issue of rot. So their days are numbered if they go right into the soil, which of course you will be pushing them into the soil. So the next thing I've done is, the upgrade is to treat half of the stake. You can see the 2 tones there, and I've actually got a piece of blue tape dividing them. This has been treated with a non-toxic wood preservative. And I've got one here, I've just used Timber Pro. This was recommended to me by a landscape architect. They do all their trees that are part of installations for playscapes and such. With that, I've been very satisfied with this product and used it for a number of years. It's great. It penetrates into the wood. It's environmentally friendly. It doesn't ooze or leach anything. And it makes that wood last so much longer than it would. I'm not prepared to say how many times more, but I'm sure I'll get 5 years of use out of this at least, whereas I might get 1 or 2 seasons untreated. Now again, I'd be ready to use this, ready to go, right on the top part, and then I can sand it, and then use the bottom to stick in and get the benefit of the preserved wood. That's awesome. But for added visibility, I've made an extra upgrade this year. I've gone and painted this a nice sunny yellow, the top part. So I have my bottom part is preserved wood, top part is a sunny yellow. I'm going to use a Sharpie, or even better, I discovered these nursery marking pens. This one's from A.M. Leonard, but I've also got other ones from my own nursery where I shop at, local nursery. What am I going to put down on this? Let's say I was going to be planting these Pusa Aceta carrots here that I just happen to have in front of me. I'm always going to put the date. Today's a good day to plant carrots in Portland, so let's say I'm going to plant some carrots on 4/11/24. There we go. I've clearly marked the date. Now let's put the crop. I'm planting carrots. But not just any carrot. I'm going to put Pusa Aceta Black. There we go. Now this has got some pop, this has got some bling. If I gotta leave town and I've got a bare piece of earth with this in it and I need to ask my neighbor, please water my carrots. I just put them in the ground. I need to have some moisture on them. It's gonna be a dry spell while I'm away. Your neighbor's gonna easily find this. You have effectively communicated both with others and with yourself. You are ready to go. You've said goodbye to these little cheap things. You've transferred your information that's on here onto something durable like this, something high vis. The other thing that's great about this is that when you plant in succession, you can just flip it over and use the other side, and you'll know more or less 2 crops worth of information at a time. For a spendier purchase, I get a thicker stake that has 4 sides on it, and you can actually record 4 different plantings in sequence and kind of keep track of what crops you're growing, helps with rotation plans, all that kind of other stuff. The bottom line is, do some stakes, do some kind of marker stake, whatever you have to do. If you have plastic, go ahead and use it. But if you want to make something out of wood, a little more sustainable material, make it durable with some non-toxic wood preservative, some paint, whatever you like, and call attention with a bright color. Use at the very least, a permanent marker like a Sharpie, but if you can get one of these nursery markers, they're even better. They're more durable, they're more permanent. And get that information out there. You will be glad you did. You will have that info both every time you wander into the garden. Later on in the season, you can transfer this to a garden notebook, and you will have the benefit of that information. Information is power in gardening. We need to know what we're growing, how it went, when we planted it, all that good stuff. It all goes here on the tag. I hope you have time to make some of these and get them out into your garden. You'll be the better for it. Better gardeners. You've been in the garden with MBC. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time, and let us know how you're doing. Let Enoch and I know how you're doing in the garden. If you try some tags, if you have some good tips, let us know that too. We're real interested. Thanks a lot. We'll catch you next time.
What is happening? Oh. All right. Let's get it together there. Thank you so much to Mark in the garden this week with us, sharing about making some really cool plant stakes. I'm telling you, these are really a great idea. Just one quick little story about last season. I've shared this before, but I could have used some of those plant stakes in one of my garden areas I just kind of like was planting a bunch of things all around a bunch, just a lot of different stuff. I had corn growing. I had I had some squash. I had all this sort of stuff going. But what I didn't notice was in the back, there was some potatoes growing and that sort of thing. And I could have really used some stakes in there to designate where things were, because I completely lost track of everything what was going in the garden. So it's a really great idea to be able to, again, have a good visual idea of what you've got growing on in your garden. And I really like those plant stakes. And another great in the garden segment from our friend Mark Boucher Colbert. So all right, it's now time for Sunday's featured guest.
You never know when you might learn something, and that's what this is about for me. These are people that I admire. Please welcome my next guest.
All right. And joining us every second Sunday of the month throughout the gardening season, we've got our good friend Scott Wilson from the Gardener Scott channel joining with us. Thank you, Scott, for joining with us again.
It's great to be here, Enoch. I want to be outside because it's so nice and sunny, but I'm taking some time out from my gardening task to spend with you and your viewers. It's good to be here.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I think, that's a little bit different than what we were talking about this last month. I mean, I think you're still dealing with some pretty freezing cold temperatures. So things have kind of started to warm up for you there in Colorado, right?
They're warming up. We've actually been hot. We're about 15 degrees Fahrenheit above normal most of this week.
Wow.
It's going to cool down this weekend. There's a chance for some rain, but the nights are still touching on freezing. Friday, it'll dip below freezing again, but it's this roller coaster in Colorado where it's hot and it's cold and it's hot and it's cold. And right now, I'm enjoying the hot.
Yeah, and I kind of touched on that a little bit at the top of the show, though, too, is that that's kind of, you got your spring season for us here. We do have a person in our chat there from Australia, so they're dealing with their fall season. But it's similar in that way. Is just the opposite, is that it's just this transitional season from a really cold winter to our really warm summer. It's just that part. And so during this time of year, it's just we can see all of these really kind of crazy fluctuations in weather. From really warm days, and then all of a sudden, 2 in the morning, it's 30 degrees, right?
Yeah, I've still got almost 5 weeks before I hit my average last frost date. So this is
Yeah.
that time of period for new gardeners, at least in my area. The plants are starting to show up at the nurseries and the garden centers, and they're tempted and they put them out in the garden. And May is actually
Yeah.
one of our snowiest months. And so
Yeah.
it's it's
Oh,
just a
wow.
great way to learn not to plant too early. And a
So you
lot of
haven't
us
even
fall
hit one of your snowiest months yet?
yeah, January and February are the driest months from a
Okay.
snow perspective. And this year we've had almost 4 times the average snow during those months. And
Oh,
so
wow.
April and May, we've had 18 inches of snow in May before. So
Oh,
we'll just
wow.
have to wait and
Yeah.
see what happens.
Yeah, again, that was another part of that warning I was telling everybody earlier, is that, and similar for me, my last frost date's not till mid-May myself, and I'm looking at my 10-day forecast right now. My
Mhm.
10-day forecast looks great. It looks awesome. If I looked at this and I was just a new gardener and I'm thinking, hey, I want to get these plants out and everything, I'm gonna like, hey, it's time to go. Look how warm
Yeah,
it looks into the forecast. That's only
yeah,
10 days, and I still got a month or so until that last frost date. And who knows what's going to happen after that 10 days. And I've seen that happen too. That happened to me,
absolutely.
a couple of times. So one of the things is we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves when it comes down to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good this time of year to clean up your garden because a lot of us put that off until spring. And it's a good time to make sure you got all your seeds, start thinking about your plants, getting your beds ready to go, do any amending if you need to do it, and then really focus. Like you, I always look at the 10-day forecast to figure out just how nice it's going to be to get out there and
Mhm.
start putting stuff in the ground.
Yeah, the one exception I was kind of mentioning with everybody this year for me again is my tomatoes. I think we kind of touched on that a little bit last time we were talking too. So I'm trying to get a little bit, if it's looking warm, if it's looking nice, and again we touched on the idea of soil temperature and those things. If
Mhm.
I'm starting to see warm enough soil temperature, then I'm looking to maybe jump a little bit ahead on my tomatoes. But in that case, though, I have to be prepared for the fact that that could change, and that I'm going to have to get out there and I'm gonna have to do something to protect these plants, or make sure
Absolutely.
that they're going to make it through any sort of possible frost. But for me, because I got such high temperatures that come up in my summertime, I want to get a little bit of a head start so I can get some good strong, plants that can really kind of maybe endure some of that higher heat,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know. Yeah, so definitely a good idea. So if you are planning on getting ahead on any of your plants, just be prepared that you might have to, just definitely keep an eye on those that forecast, on a
Like
daily basis until
most,
you're
and I can throw plastic on the hoops in
Mhm.
spring, that extra little bit of heat. I can throw shade cloth on in
Yeah,
summer, a little bit of shade, and setting up a system where you've got those covers when you need them really can make a big difference. Not just in early spring when we might get a frost, but throughout the season, of course.
right. Yeah, definitely. And so let's see. The one of the things I did want to kind of touch on today too is that there are kind of a couple of things going on also as this time. Not only is it the temperature and that stuff, but we've got kind of two seasons of crops that we're kind of looking at and working on at the moment. And right now, and I'm not sure where you're at with a lot of it in your area, but it's also time for cool season crops, which are different than our warm season crops. So that's something you want to touch on a little bit there and talk a little bit
Sure.
about, the difference, because for a lot of new gardeners, I think things are kind of confusing. I remember
Yeah.
when I was first gardening and I was thinking, oh, I want to plant stuff. And I think spring, this is when you plant everything. You go get all your seeds, you go do all that sort of stuff. So for new gardeners, it's kind of a little bit, what's the difference? We got cool season crops and warm season crops.
Yeah, I think many of us move into gardening with the experiences we remember. We were in school, then we got out of school, and it was that point that our family had a garden, our friends had a garden, the neighbors had a garden, and so we tend to think of gardening as a summer activity with the tomatoes and the peppers and the squash and the melons, and those are the warm season plants. And
Mhm.
generally, a warm season plant cannot handle frost. It can't handle a freeze. If any of those plants, the tomatoes and the peppers and the squash and the melons, if any of them are exposed to freezing temperatures, they're done. The whole plant might not die, but enough of the plant will die that the season is over. And so, any of those plants that are susceptible to the cold damage are warm season plants. There's a whole other category of plants,
Mhm.
brassicas, the beets, the spinach, the lettuce, the radishes, the peas. Those plants can actually shake off a freeze without too much difficulty. And so, if gardeners start learning about the cool season options, you can literally get 3 times the amount of produce, 3 times the number of plants that you can grow in your garden. Because about a month before your last frost date, you can actually put many of these plants into the ground. And so, you and I are both talking about a month away from the end of the frost. Well, the
Mhm.
peas, the spinach, the lettuce, the beets, the turnips, the Brussels sprouts, the broccoli, all of those plants can go in the ground early and start growing. And depending on how long they're going to take to reach harvest, about the time you're harvesting many of those plants, that's when it's time to put in the warm season plants. So that's a
Mhm.
succession planting strategy where you get started early, get a whole harvest done, and then put in the warm season plant summer garden that we all love to grow so that you can get the delicious tomatoes and all the rest of it.
Mhm.
And then the nice thing is you get to do it all over again in autumn because
Yeah.
all of those plants that can handle the cool temperatures of spring can handle the cool temperatures of fall. And so
Mhm.
you get a frost that kills your cucumbers, pull out the cucumbers and put in some spinach or beets or whatever you happen to do. And now that's where you get your third harvest in the same bed, in the same garden, in the same year.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's all, real benefit to the cool season crops, and kind of also in that sense that we do got those 2 times, fall and spring, where we got those or early spring, late winter, we got those really cool periods of temperatures.
Yeah.
So that's a great thing about those is we get 2 kind of seasons of those, or some of us. I mean, there's some people with a little bit shorter seasons, and they can try to fit things as best they can. But,
Well, and that's where the season extension with like the
mhm,
plastic covers, that is enough to
yep,
usually buy you a few weeks on the front side and a few weeks on the back side to be able to take advantage of what the plants will give you.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So, what are some of those things that in fact, real quick question though, someone was asking, what part of Colorado are you from?
I live near Colorado Springs.
Awesome.
It's
Yeah.
it's southern middle. I'm about an hour south of Denver.
What's the elevation like?
So my garden is a little bit above 7,000 feet elevation. So
Yeah.
it's in the plains, the high
Mm,
plains of
mhm.
Colorado, just to the east of the Rocky Mountains.
Right on, right on. And so as far as like cool season crops, is there anything that you've already got started or things you got growing on there too for yourself or
So I don't have anything started yet. I'm actually going to be traveling next week, and so I'm going to be a couple weeks behind where I might normally be. But
yeah,
middle of April into the beginning of May, with the plastic cover, assuming that the nights are going to get cold, this is about the
yeah.
time of year I start putting in spinach and peas in particular. And
Hmm.
then I also like to start growing my beets, and the beets and the spinach and the peas generally take about 60 days, about 2 months to reach harvest. So if I
Yeah.
put them in the middle of April, I can harvest the middle of June, and it's the middle of June that I'm putting in my tomatoes and my peppers, because by then the soil has warmed up and I can get those planted. So I don't have anything going right now. Well, I take it back. In my greenhouse, I do have kale and lettuce growing right now that I had started over the winter, but just waiting for doing it in the outside beds about another week and a half before I'll be back to do that.
All right. And so like so that would be so you're aiming for about how many weeks would you say prior to your last frost date?
So a month before the last frost
Yeah, it was a
date
month. Yeah.
is generally when most of those plants can go in the ground. And then being ready with the plastic cover if it gets too cold. Now, they can handle temperatures at and near freezing, but if it gets much colder than that, when it starts dropping below about 28 degrees Fahrenheit, you really should protect those plants, because a hard freeze can damage some of the leaves. It probably won't kill the plants, but it can damage some of the young tender growth that is just starting. And so a month from the last frost date is a general target for most of those. But most of the plant tags or the plant seed packets will
Yeah.
have that information on it as well. And so that's a great way to get a specific idea of how early you can put them in, is just read the seed packet or the plant tag and see if there's guidance on it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I did, and I didn't do it this year, but the last couple of years, I would get my broccoli started early. My other brassicas, cabbages, and things like that. But I grow
Mhm.
my broccoli because I use these 5 gallon wicking containers that I use, and they're not doing anything while they're waiting for my peppers to get planted
That's
into
right.
them, which it doesn't happen until I wait till mostly late May in order to get them out. They grow indoors until they get to go outside. So all the time that they're doing that, I'll take those broccoli plants and put those in those containers.
Oh yeah, great idea.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned about freezing there too, and I was really surprised about this the first year I ever tried this, was I got them out nice and early because I want to make sure, because broccoli, again, this is probably gonna be about 90 days of
Yeah.
growth, maybe a little bit more depending on your variety. But we'd get some freezing nights. I had a couple of days that it was cold, it was freezing. And I went out there and I felt the soil and you could literally knock on it and it was like
Yeah.
hard wood. And these plants were in there and I'm like, oh no, I think these are going to be done for sure. There's no way they're going to be able to survive this. And here it is, if a week later, everything's warmed back up again, the soil's nice and soft, and they're growing new leaves. They're doing
Yeah.
just fine and did really well during the freezing season. So I think
Now,
that's one of those. I'm sorry.
did you start from seed in those buckets, or did you start the seeds indoors and then put the plants in the bucket?
Yes. Okay. So then, yeah, that's true. I did start them indoors. So yeah, I'll get a lot of that stuff started probably late January, early
Okay.
February kind of thing, and then get them started indoors. Really only takes a couple weeks, get them really ready to go and all of that. But yeah, I mean, getting a good few inch good starts on there, then getting them outdoors and that sort of thing. Because again, like you said, depending on the variety, they could take 90 plus days. So I want to plan ahead from when I'm going to be planting my peppers out, go back that far, make sure I'm timing my broccoli to be ready to go outdoors around that time so that they can have that full growth.
Exactly.
Yeah, and for me, a little busy this winter, so my timing got really thrown off when it came to the brassicas for this year. So I didn't get those out to
That's
do that
okay.
this year. But it's a really great idea to do that kind of succession planting in the sense of seasons. Where
Mhm.
grow something in a space, utilize that space while you can for the cool season, and then move on into your warmer season crops when those are harvested, which is
And you
great.
raise a good point because many gardeners are starting tomato seeds and pepper seeds 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks ahead of time. Well, at
Hmm.
the same time, you can be starting your broccoli and your Brussels sprouts and have
Yeah.
those growing. The difference is you still need to wait a whole other month before you can put the warm season plants in, but the brassicas will be ready and you can get those
Yeah.
out much, much earlier. So, yeah, that's a good plan.
Yeah, it's definitely a good idea and work really well too. It's probably, in fact, um, I've always been kind of challenged with brassicas for some reason, and I kind of fall in this category of gardeners where trying to figure that out because it takes a while to start getting an idea of like, okay, the timing on these and when do I get them moving, when do I get them out in the garden, and when I found and figured that out and started using them in those containers prior to my peppers, that's when I first started seeing some really good success with my
Good.
plants. Yeah, was getting that figured out. And I think again too, that's just something that a lot of newer gardeners are just they're going to really and I know from experience is you're gonna have to really kind of figure that out and go through
Mhm.
that. But again too, you mentioned one of the best things to do is really kind of pay attention to those seed packets, and then also doing a little research on what are some of those different crops that
Yeah.
grow in a cooler season versus the warmer season, and then start figuring out the timing from there.
Yeah. And it's not universal. Beans, for
Hmm.
instance,
Hmm.
generally, beans are a warm season crop.
Yeah.
And, you know, generally we're putting them out after the soil warms up, but there are some bean varieties that can actually go in before the last frost date. At least the seed can go in the ground and they'll germinate without a warm temperature. So it's
Yeah.
not universal, but there is always a variety that can fit with your garden if you've got some of those concerns about the weather and the climate and the temperature of the soils.
Yeah, yeah, and again too, that's a thing about that, great, kind of a really great thing about gardening is those sort of kind of differences, even between varieties of the same type of plant or crop that you're trying to grow. As I mentioned with broccoli, there's some varieties that are 80 days, there's some varieties that are 100 days, and some in between, and so and then also how they can handle different temperatures.
Mhm.
Some varieties of spinach will handle it getting just a little bit warmer than other
Yeah,
varieties will. And I mentioned
yeah,
spinach. I should have said lettuce. Spinach is really if
yeah, yeah.
there's any
Spinach.
plant that I have that doesn't like it getting warm, it's spinach for sure.
Yeah, but see, I've learned many years ago because we get such hot summers here, and I discovered a slow bolt variety of spinach that I can actually grow well into summer without any problem. And Napa cabbage, I've been trying to grow Napa cabbage for years, and came across a slow bolt variety last year that did great. I grew it all summer long, and it never had any issues. Now cabbage tends to be a biennial and it's not going to bolt until the second year. But when the weather is harsh and the sun is hot and the wind is blowing, even biennials will bolt in the first year. And that was the problem I had with the Napa cabbage before is the other varieties, even though supposedly they were biennials, they always bolted in the first year. And that was so much trouble. So my Napa cabbage actually is in the bed right now. I let it overwinter with the intent that I'm definitely saving those seeds because they've done so well in my garden.
Yeah, that's a good idea too. Yeah, save those things that do well is for sure. And you mentioned, and we talk about that. That's I think another thing that I find can be kind of confusing to newer gardeners too is that we're planting out cooler season crops. And again, too, if you're starting later in your season, trying to grow cooler season crops with with your warmer season things, tomatoes, peppers, and that sort of stuff that you're planting out, bolting. I think that kind of confuses a lot of gardeners. In fact, I'll tell you, I once had to stop a lady from purchasing some lettuce starts at a garden center. It was a big box store, mind you, too. It wasn't a local place. I don't think a local place would really do that to you as much. But she's about to go and check it through, and they were going to check her through and all that without no problem, and sell her these lettuce starts, and that they were this tall. Lettuce shouldn't be that tall,
That's
and,
right.
and and I was like, ma'am, you really don't want to get those. And she's like, why? What's wrong? And I was like, these are actually what they call bolting. They are about to go to seed. So if you want to save the seed from this, and you think this is a variety or that, which, you don't know if you got a hybrid or not, but,
Right.
you could do that, but you're not going to really want or enjoy any of the lettuce that's going to come off of that, because it's going to get really, really, I don't know, what do you call it? Sour tasting. It's really
bitter. I think lettuce
bitter,
really gets
yeah.
bitter and a little bit tough when it reaches that phase. And for new gardeners who don't fully understand the life cycle of those annual plants that we're growing, like the lettuce in particular, they have a short life, and many of the lettuces that we grow are going to be harvested in 30 to 45 days, maybe occasionally a 60-day lettuce. And that's it. It's done. And then it starts getting exposed to the heat, and the plant says, I'm done. I've grown all I'm going to grow. I'm going to die. Now it's time for me to set seed so that I can propagate and have my offspring. And that's all bolting is. It's the end of the plant's life that is identified with flowers and seeds, and then it dies.
Yeah. So when you start noticing those plants start to stretch up to the sky, they're, spinach should be low to the ground. Your lettuces should be low to the ground. But when they start extending themselves up, and you can see like
Over.
they're just, they're ready to go to seed. And unless you've got a nice heirloom variety or open pollinated that is going to be a viable seed, you most likely might want to just pull those out and start moving on into another crop. Yeah. All right. Let's see here. So let's talk a little bit. Okay, we did touch on a little bit about starting plants indoors. So a lot. What are some of the tips or anything like that you might have for gardeners who are going to be getting plant started indoors?
Yeah,
Especially
and
those who are facing the warmer weather crops, mind you.
Sure. And these are questions most of us get who are making videos on YouTube. And it comes down to the temperature that the seeds need for the best germination. So most of our household air temperatures are warm enough for seeds to germinate. But if you've got a heat mat that you can put the trays of seeds on, peppers, eggplant, tomatoes, those warm season plants generally will benefit from a warmer temperature for the seeds to germinate. They'll germinate faster, and they'll typically germinate better if you can put them on a heat mat. It's not a requirement, but it does make a difference. And then keeping the environment moist, the soil moist, but also the air moist. A humid environment when those seedlings first emerge is also beneficial to get the plant off. So I use the 72 cell flats and cover them with the plastic dome that comes with them. And a dome will hold in all that humidity, really helps those seedlings get established. You don't have to have a plastic dome. You could use a plastic bag. You just need something to try to keep the humidity over the plants. But once the seedlings start growing, and especially when they put on their second set of leaves, which is the first true set of leaves, that's the time to take the dome off, because you don't want them exposed to any possible fungal diseases because the seedling gets too much moisture and the air is too humid. And then with the dome off, that's the time to start thinking about bottom watering, which is another
Mhm.
technique that experienced gardeners learn over the years. When you water from above, it's really easy to saturate the soil and end up drowning your plants. If you let the surface of the soil kind of be your guide and water from the bottom, then through capillary action, kind of like what you were talking about with a wicking bucket, the
Mhm.
soil will stay evenly moist. And if the top gets too dry, more moisture is drawn up into that soil. And so tends to be a little better way to moderate the soil moisture by watering from below. And you've done it, no doubt. I've done it. All
Mhm.
gardeners do it. We overwater our seedlings and we end
Mhm.
up killing seedlings from kindness because we think every day we've got to water them. And that's not the
Yeah.
case. You should check your soil periodically to see if it's moist, if it's saturated, if it's dry. And you may not need to water the seedlings every day. You might be able to get by with 2 days or 3 days, depending on how humid your indoor air is. So
Yeah.
those are a couple of the big things that I've been getting a lot of questions about.
Yeah, I think in right too is that for like indoor starting, utilizing those 72 cell trays that you can get, a lot of them, a lot of places where you can get these and find these, very inexpensively, and they have the tray, they're built into it, so they can naturally just kind of bottom water them. Oh, looks like we got a froze.
Yeah, can you see me? Can you hear me?
I can see, it looks like we froze up a little bit, but you can hear
Okay,
me
hold
though,
on.
right?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you okay. I've got a black screen for some instance on my end, so I'll see if
Oh,
I
but
can fix that. But as long as you can hear me, we can keep on talking.
yeah, I can hear you, and we got an image of you up. It's just frozen.
Okay. Well, let's
But
keep on
anyways, like I
talking.
was saying though, those 72 cell trays are really great. They're inexpensive, and they're built to bottom water so that you can fill them up, fill the tray up, and then let those starts soak up the water from the bottom.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
mentioned Yeah, you mentioned needing warm temperatures plus using the domes, which I do. And again, you want to get those off, as soon as they start putting on the new leaves, not the coddle leaves, but the new leaves. And one of the things I tried this year, it was suggested by somebody who was watching the program, and I went and tried it for my tomatoes, and was to because I use these shop lights.
Oh,
So
yeah,
I've got
that's
these
all I
shop
use.
lights that hang over kind of like a table that I have set. So, and then I put everything underneath of the shop lights for the light. But one of the things they suggested was, instead of heat mats, why not put your trays up on the shop lights above them, because they're hanging there, and I've got it, they can handle the weight because I've got them on chains and everything. So I tried this. I thought, this is a great idea. Instead of like having to have all the heat mats, let's put them on there. But the the only thing is you've got to remember you've done this,
Oh,
and
yeah.
heat will get something to grow a lot faster than what you're thinking. So if you're thinking, oh, tomatoes, it's going to take about a week for them to pop up and germinate and all of that. Well, if you put them under some heat, it's probably only going to take a few days. And that's kind of what ended up happening for me with these is I walked away. I got busy for a day or so, and then next thing you know, I'm coming back to them. I'm like, oh no, because now without any light, they're stretching and reaching up for the
Yeah.
sky, right? And that's the big thing that a lot of people have happen to them, and I see this all the time, especially this time of year in a lot of the gardening groups, is people talk about leggy starts. Oh,
Yeah, the light really is a critical component to get the seedlings growing right. I would be hesitant to put my trays on the lights. I've got 2 trays that I started using this year, and each of them got a crack and started draining. So each time I watered, some water dripped out. So I would hate to think that the water was dripping out onto the lights and short out the light, but I'm okay with keeping my plants underneath the lights.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the thing, you just want to be kind of careful. They need those lights. So if you are starting your seedlings indoors, another thing you want to be thinking about though too is they start popping up and they come up out of the ground. One of the things immediately I want to make sure is going on is that light is right down close to them. Um,
Absolutely.
and I never really had too much problem with heat from the lamps when I was using fluorescents, but I've moved now to LEDs, which are even cooler. So
Yeah.
you can get those lights right on top of those. And that's one of the best things to do in order to keep your plants from stretching out, especially indoors.
Yeah, I like the shop lights because they cover a larger area. I can put multiple trays under them. I have LED lights for individual trays, but the cost for an LED light is the same size as some of those shop lights is kind of cost prohibitive. So
Yeah, I
smaller.
actually found some this year that weren't that expensive. So I did
Oh,
trade
nice.
out a few of mine, because they're 4-foot shop lights
Yeah,
to
that's what
some
I have.
LEDs as well. But yeah, again, that's something that hopefully in these next couple of years, those will get a lot more, inexpensive for gardeners.
Yeah.
And
So
again,
Enoch,
too, it's a great idea.
I'm gonna back out of this chat for a
Yeah.
moment and then come back in and see if we can get a picture going.
Yeah, see if that might do the trick there for sure. Awesome, awesome. We'll get Gardner Scott back here in just a moment. Seems we got a little issue there, but that's all right. And again, like we're talking about right now, we're talking about starting seeds and things like that indoors, and different strategies of being able to do that. Oh, looks like we got them back already. Nice and quick. Let's drop them back in here.
All right.
Okay, there we are.
And we got a picture this time.
Something stalled up there.
Yeah.
There's always something kind of technical and fun going on with these live
It's on
streams,
my
right?
end. I had some issues last year with my stream freezing and the computer shutting down. So it happened again a couple weeks ago, actually, during my Monday live stream. I think back in January, maybe last year in December, got a new computer dedicated to nothing else but doing the live streams.
Yeah.
And I still am having problems with my internet clicking off. And then just happened. Just everything froze and lost the camera. So I can't figure
Yeah.
it out.
Uh, Something, and it just seems like weird, strange. In fact, right before this show, I was dealing with, as I was getting things prepared to get started, I was getting this kind of sound like something was loading up. You get that kind of little ring ding kind of sound, but it kept
Mhm.
happening like every 2-3 seconds, and it kept going. And I'm like, what is it? I'm unplugging things and trying to get it figured out. It was completely new. I've had freezing happen. I've had other things happen, but that's the thing with technology. They could throw you
Yeah.
some curveballs, right?
Yeah.
Especially for us
It's a
live
pain,
streaming. Yeah,
but got to do it.
right on, right on. So I guess before all of that, we're talking about getting seeds started indoors, getting things going. One of the kind of important parts of starting seed plants indoors, though, is getting them prepared to go outside when the
Yep.
time comes. And this will be something that'll be coming up for people here in the next few weeks, depending on where you live, mind you, in your climate. But you've got to prepare these plants for getting outdoors. I mean, they're underneath this
Absolutely.
artificial light, right?
Absolutely. In fact, that's the main topic of my live stream tomorrow is hardening off, and I'll be talking
Oh, yes.
much more for over the course of my entire show. Uh, it makes a big difference. Just I think many gardeners don't do it as much as they should, and new gardeners really don't understand the concept at all. But even for those of us that know about hardening off, it can be a
Hmm.
challenge. I have a pomegranate tree that I got from IV Organics last year, and it was sitting down in my basement underneath some low lights and went dormant and started sprouting again. So I brought it upstairs, exposed it to some sunlight through the window, and last week decided to put my pomegranate tree outside to harden it off. and 1 hour of sunlight was enough to fry some of those leaves
Oh,
and
wow.
damage the plant. And so the key to hardening off is that it's a gradual
Mhm.
exposure to what the plants are going to encounter in the garden. And to take our plants, those young seedlings that have been protected, they've had ideal conditions underneath those LED lights that are nice and cool. If we throw them out into the garden right away, they're done for. They're going to be baked
Yep.
by the sun. The nights might be too cold. And if they survive, they're probably going to be stunted because of some of that early damage. So it's a gradual process of a period of days
Mhm.
exposing these plants to sun, to wind, to nighttime temperatures
Yeah.
before we put them in the ground.
Yep. Yep. And for me, I always recommend, no direct sun exposure your first day. I always recommend just getting them in some shade. I mean, there's going to be
Yeah,
plenty of UV in shade. There's going to be, and it's going to be, and that's what a lot of people don't think about. It's going to be more light in the shade outdoors than what they're getting under your artificial light indoors. It may seem
yes.
brighter when you're looking at those lights indoors, but you're actually getting more UV exposure and more brighter light from shade outdoors. So it's always a great way to start.
Absolutely.
Go
Yeah,
with the
and
shade
it makes
first.
a big difference. The I had some questions on my channel, and we corresponded back and forth a little bit a week or two ago. You eventually need to move them out into the sun, and I was being asked, can you do a week of hardening off in the shade? And you really can't. The first day or
Yep,
two,
yep,
for depending on how long you're leaving the plant out, the bulk of that time will be in the shade. But the whole point is you want the plant to be ready for
yep,
whatever it's being exposed to in the garden. But you're
yep.
right, a sheltered area with shade, and especially if you live in a windy region like I do, protection from the wind in those first days is also important. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I've had this problem with those little seedlings snapping off.
Mhm.
They've been growing for 2 months in my basement. I put
Yep.
them out in the shade and they're fine. They gradually expose them. I go to the store and come back and we're getting 35-mile-an-hour gusts, and
Yep.
those seedlings are now, half of them have broken off because the wind was too strong. So there are a lot of factors to hardening
Yeah,
off.
yeah, and even indoors, I try to make sure I've got small fans or to kinda blow some wind on them to kinda strengthen up their stems and all of that, but again, like the light, that fan is almost only so much wind. You get them
Yeah.
out into nature, and nature could throw you a good gust here and there, and next thing you know, those things are snapping and not doing too well, and again, too, in the hardening off process, it isn't just the light we're thinking about. You got wind, but also you mentioned too, one of the other things is they've also got to get used to being outdoors during the nighttime as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I try to spend at least, it typically takes a week to do the process, to a good degree to ensure they're hardened off. And the last 2 days in particular, I have them out 24 hours. And usually that first exposure to the nighttime is near the house, so they're
Hmm.
still relatively protected. But at
Yeah.
least the last night, and sometimes 2 nights, I put them in the garden in the location they're going to be in, so that they have a 48-hour cycle before they're put in the ground, because the ground's going to, when that transplanting process is going to add stress to the plants. So put them
Yeah.
in the spot in the garden and then just let them get used to it, then you transplant.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to over stress your plants. It's probably one of the quickest ways to have an unsuccessful plant is to
Yeah.
really over stress it, and so those things are really kind of key and important, and especially again too, the advantage here really is that we're getting things started really early. We're allowing them to grow indoors and really develop nice strong root systems, get really good sized plants and all of that sort of thing, and then we're going to want to kind of gradually introduce them to the outdoors and then get them into our gardening spaces. And that way we've got nice plants that have had a good head start to them versus just trying to get plants put into the seeded directly into the ground,
Absolutely.
which can be done. You can do that
Oh,
as
you
well.
can. And
Yeah.
and for the most part, where we are growing the plants or where we get the plants is a determinant of how much you harden off. So, my local Lowe's and Home Depot and Walmart, many of their plants are outdoors. And
Yeah.
so if you're buying an outdoor plant, you can put it into your garden that same day because
Yeah.
it's been exposed to all those temperatures. But if you're buying from your local nursery and they're growing in a sheltered greenhouse in the nursery, even though it's a full size plant, you should still consider hardening it off. It is probably okay with the sunlight if it was growing in a greenhouse, but it
Yeah.
doesn't have that exposure to the wind and to the nighttime temperature. So it might only be
Mhm.
3 days of hardening off in a situation like that, but you still need to acclimate the plant to a 24-hour period.
Yeah, because we want our plants to get off to the best start possible so that we can get, the best harvests later on in the season. So, it's always really kind of key and important to be able to make sure we're doing those sort of things in order to make sure that they can get
Yep.
into the garden space successfully. All right, all right. So one of the things actually I wanted to ask you about this because I touched on this just a little bit before you came on. I was reading this article about because here's another thing was doing this last week was planting out some potatoes in my area. I'm getting some potatoes planted out.
Mhm.
But I was reading this article this last week on the HuffPost about what was it? One vegetable you shouldn't store next to other vegetables, and the article was about onions. Onions in storage will help encourage other things to, like your potatoes to chit, or even your apples to kind of just ripen more, basically, right? So what I was wondering is, what do you think of the idea as a strategy instead of something that we're looking at as like we don't want to store them together? Maybe a new harvest, something we've just brought out of the ground. We just harvested our potatoes. Maybe we don't want to store them next to onions. But what if we got some potatoes and we want to get them chitted and we want to get them ready and we want to
Yeah.
get them out into the garden? Could using an onions be a strategy?
It could, but I don't think it's necessary. The
No.
the key about chitting, so a lot of the vegetables and fruits that we put next to each other, and I'm assuming it's ethylene gas from the onions because the bananas and the apples and all the fruits are giving off ethylene gases, and that's what tends to accelerate ripening. So if it's not ethylene gas, it's probably something similar in an onion that it is emitting a gas, and that gas is the promoting the growth of the potato. Well, yes, I suppose if you were running a little bit late, you could try that. But
Yeah.
temperature, back to the temperature that we were talking about with soil, temperature
Mhm.
is a key component when it comes to chitting potatoes. So that's why you want to store your potatoes in a cool, dry location because if the temperature gets too warm, it will start going through the growth process and it'll start sending out those little sprouts. And
Mhm.
I don't really think you need to accelerate that because
Yeah.
if it's cold, you could put all the onions you want and that potato is not going to start
Okay.
sprouting. So increase the temperature and I think that'll have more of an impact. And
Right.
and it's also a common misconception because we buy potatoes at the store and we put them in our pantry and then we open up the pantry and we see all those sprouts coming from our potatoes. Many gardeners think that that's how you chit. You chit in the dark, but really
Yeah.
you'll get better chitting in light and it
Yeah.
shouldn't be direct light. So if you want to get your potatoes started because you were late, stick them on top of your refrigerator.
Yeah.
And the heat from the refrigerator and the light in your kitchen will be enough they'll chit within a day or two in a situation like that. And you don't need to worry about onions.
Yeah, right. And also, again, too, as you're saying, if they're in the light, then they're not trying to stretch out seeking light. And then you got all
Yeah,
of these, like you said, you get
exactly.
this big old monster looking thing instead of, instead of just a little bit that you like, in it. You just want to, in fact, to me, it's just, you want to see some sort of growth. Like as soon as it
Yeah,
starts to even pop, as soon as it starts to
yeah,
even look like that, then you're probably ready to go, right?
exactly. And that's many of the seed potatoes. If you have a small seed potato, a lot of people just plant the whole potato after it started showing those
Mhm.
sprouts. For bigger potatoes, I'll generally let the growth go a little bit bigger because I'm cutting those big potatoes into smaller sections, and I want to
Mhm.
make sure that I'm going to get some sprouts in each of those smaller chunks. And so I'll let it shit a little bit, but still it's not even more than half an inch at its height when I'm
Yeah.
putting it in the ground. It's just that initial indication of growth that you're really looking for.
Yeah, and if you're cutting them, I mean, like, you say you cut them more than, like, half, you cut
Yeah. Yeah,
basically single eyes out, basically?
you only need 2, generally, you only need 1, but
Yeah.
generally 2. I usually, default to 3, so 2 to 3 eyes per piece, and so
Mhm.
a big potato might have, 12 to 18 eyes on it, and all
Yeah,
of those start sprouting. You can cut that easily into 4 or 5 pieces, and then each
yeah,
of those pieces will give you a potato plant.
and then, again, how about, you don't wanna take those and cut those and stick them directly into the garden though, right?
No, it helps to let the the cut
The
portion,
flesh, yeah,
the flesh actually dry out a little bit, and it only takes about a day for that to dry out, and then it creates a barrier
mhm,
to any potential rot or any problems in the garden. I've put them directly into the garden and never had an issue, but
yeah,
there's that potential that
yeah.
if you cut the potato and put it directly into the garden, that open wound is more susceptible to some rot or potential insect damage.
Yeah, yeah. I've tried it a couple of times. I've found more success by drying them out than
Okay.
just directly putting them in. I have, like you said, had some that have done just fine if I put them directly in as well too. But I go through that extra step in order
Oh,
to
sure.
ensure. Exactly, just to
And
be
it'll still
sure.
keep growing. So while it's drying, you get an extra day or two of the sprout developing before you put it in the ground too.
All right. Okay. And one of the other things coming up too is we've been talking a lot about, like we're getting things started indoors. We've got a lot of these sort of things going on. Some of even our cool weather stuff, getting them started early indoors and getting them out. But we're also getting to that point as we start approaching our last frost date, things get warm enough. There's a lot of things out there that we can just start directly seeding into our garden. What are some of those things that you can directly seed or should directly seed in your garden?
So absolutely the root crops.
Yeah.
You don't want to start carrots ahead of time or
Mhm.
parsnips ahead of time. They have a long tap root, and if that tap root is damaged during transplanting, you're not going to get a carrot or a parsnip. So all of this,
Yeah.
the root crops, I put directly into the garden with the direct sowing of the seed. And then a lot of it depends on your season. So my season is short, but it's long enough that I can grow almost everything from seed. So my cucumbers, I start from seed because they grow pretty quickly. My squash, I start from seed. The zucchini started from seed. The pumpkins are started from seed, directly
Yeah.
sown outdoors.
Yeah.
And even the brassicas, even if I'm starting the spinach and the cabbage and the lettuce, I don't normally start those ahead of time indoors. I'll start them outdoors with that plastic cover to help raise the soil temperature a little bit. And so, for the most part, the only plants I'm starting indoors are the ones that need 6 weeks or more of a head start, and that's the tomatoes
Yeah.
and the eggplant and the ground cherries and the peppers. Those are the plants that I'm starting indoors, but everything else, even the melons,
Yeah.
I'll start directly outdoors because we touched on it when we were talking about the hardening off, but the process of transplanting stresses the plants quite a bit more than we realize. And so a melon is only
Yeah.
started maybe 3 weeks before transplanting outdoors. And when we transplant it, the shock of transplanting is going to take a week for it to recover. And so really, we've only gained maybe a week, possibly 2 weeks of a head start for some of these plants that we're doing indoors. And now you have to take into account hardening off, which takes a week. And so I think many of those kind of things where we're only starting a few weeks before we put them outside, by the time we harden off and by the time the shock is recovered from, we haven't gained much. So I do everything from seed.
Do it all from seed. Right
Yeah.
on, right on. Yeah, yeah. All right. And let's see here. One of the things I wanted to touch on too is something we had a really fun conversation with Nicole Smith yesterday on our show. From Nicole Smith Gardening. She's got a nice little small channel there out of Texas. And she's was telling me about how much trouble she has with vine borers. So I wanted to make sure I asked you about this sort of thing. Got any advice for Nicole and other gardeners out there who are dealing with that sort of pest when it comes to their growing?
Yeah, a lot of it
Really
depends
squash.
on the specific pest. And so what I
Mm,
always
yeah,
encourage is for the gardener to find out exactly what kind of insect it is and
yeah,
then learn about the life cycle of that
yeah,
insect. So most of the borers, the ones that are digging into the roots or the ones that are digging into the vines, they're doing that and in the larval stage. And so the adult will lay eggs either on the plant in fall or early winter. And then those eggs will hatch. The larva generally will live in the soil. And then when the soil is warming up in spring, the larva digs into the plant. And so many of the borers fall into that general category. But that's why it's important to understand exactly what pest it is. So if you can disrupt that life cycle, then you disrupt the possibility of you having the borers or those kind of pests in your garden. And it could be as simple as cleaning up your garden earlier in fall because the eggs that are being laid on the previous year's plants, if you pull them out, pull the plants out, now those eggs aren't going to be hatching and that larva isn't going to be living in the soil. If you don't clean up your garden for whatever reason in the fall, disrupting the soil, just cultivating it in spring is often enough to expose the larva. And we've all seen that if we're digging in the garden in spring and we see the grubs that are in the soil, that's just an overwintering larva of some type of insect. And once we expose it, the birds are going to eat it, it's going to die in the sun. And so just doing some cultivation in the soil is often enough. And so I normally do my compost amending in fall, but there's an excuse for composting in spring where you lay
yeah,
the compost and you actually work it into the soil, and that's often enough to deal with some of those insects that might be living in the soil. And once the plant material is gone, the insect is essentially gone from that bed. Another possibility is that the insect adult is showing up early, laying eggs in that soil or around those plants. And then as the plant grows, the larva will become a problem later in the summer. And that's when you start looking at row covers over your hoops, where you put the seeds in the ground, the seedlings start growing, and you have that bed completely blocked from insects with a cloth row cover so that the adult can't get in and lay the eggs. So it's the life cycle. Is the adult
Yeah.
laying the eggs in spring, in summer, in fall? And when is the larva emerging? And when is it eating the plants? Once you do the research to figure that out for the specific pest you have, it's relatively easy to fix it.
Right on. Yeah. And again, coming down to just disruption is what it is. They, just like anything else, they've got a life cycle, and if you do it, and that's kind of, I think that's the case for a lot of those sort of insect pests that we deal with, is you just got to make sure you're just kind of getting in their way from being able to do what they want to do, and that's just reproduce, when it comes down to it.
And it's all, it's squash bugs, and it is potato beetles, and if you know what is affecting your plants, you see an adult, pluck off that adult and squish it or throw it in soapy water or whatever you want to do. But when you understand the life cycle, you realize that the reason you saw the adult in the middle of June is because that's egg laying season. And as soon as you see the bug, you pull it off, you kill it, and then you start inspecting your leaves and looking for the eggs. And when you come across the eggs, you rub your thumb under the bottom of the leaf and scrape off all the eggs. And that's another way to start disrupting, because like you said, they want to propagate, they want their young to explode their populations in your garden. And if you can keep those eggs from hatching or even being laid in the first place, then you won't have those problems.
Yeah. I was telling Nicole is that I haven't had to worry about vine borers. Not something I've had to deal with yet in my area, but I have dealt with a lot of the squash bugs. And the one I'm learning about this year that came up this last year is the dreaded pea weevil.
I've never had those, but
oh my.
Sounds like fun.
I thought I grew some black-eyed peas, Scott.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Like, what is this little black spot on my peas? And I was digging at it, looking at it, and next thing you know, this little bug comes flying out of it. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? And I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, I usually grow so I'll harvest up my the peas that I use fresh, or I freeze a bunch, but when I'm done, and I grow a lot, so when I'm done for what I need, I let the plants go to and create more seed, because what I like to do is save that pea seed so that I can do microgreens during the winter time. So when I got all of these saved up, I had a big old bag of peas and everything ready and everything, and came back to them when for when they were to check on them after they were dry and all of that, and noticed most all of them had this pea weevil in it. But that happened well before I harvested too, because that bug's getting in there as I'm learning. So that's kind of my challenge this year, is to kind of learn that life cycle of this dreaded pea weevil, and hopefully be able to do something about it. If not this season, but definitely work on disrupting it this season, and hopefully by maybe next season is something I hopefully won't have to deal with.
Well, and if you want to take it to the next level, not only the life cycle of the pests, but learning what their natural predators are. There are entire families of predators that are focused on very specific insects. And so you can attract those beneficial predators to your garden, because this is a picture from last year in my garden. I grow grasses, I grow herbs, I grow flowers, I grow ground covers, I grow a ton of different types of plants with just a hope that those predators are going to be attracted to. Some are attracted to the grasses, some are attracted to the herbs, some are attracted to the flowers. And when those predators show up, it's amazing how quickly those pests, those bad bugs disappear. I saw that at the school garden that I was at years ago. The first year, pretty successful because it was a brand new garden. Second year, a lot of pests. Third year, the lettuce was being eaten. A lot of our brassicas were showing damage. And in the fourth year, nothing. Because in the second and third years, we planted the flowers and the herbs and the grasses. And in that fourth year, it did take 4 years, but in that fourth year, the predators naturally appeared, and we didn't have to do any spraying. We didn't have to do any mechanical plucking of the adults. Nature just took care of itself.
Yeah, that's a great benefit to having a very diverse garden with to do all these sort of different things to attract different, pests, and different things and bugs generally that will feed off of those pests.
Yep.
And you're just trying to really kind of create a great living cycle that kind of is beneficial to the whole garden
Exactly.
in general. One other thing, though, too, I was kind of mentioning is, especially the vine borer, the only solution I thought of that I could come up with for myself as I've not dealt with them is that, there are varieties of squash out there that aren't susceptible to vine borers as well, too. So you can always look at those as alternatives, right?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's about that time. I could talk with you all day, all
Yeah, me
month,
too.
every day, Scott, but when it comes down to it, we've only got so much time on the show, and we have delved into a lot of really great information today. And again, I really thank you so much for joining with us here.
Oh, my
And,
pleasure.
and answering all of our questions and all of that. And I encourage everybody as well, too, as we've got a link down below, but I'm sure everybody's already subscribed. But if you're not already, go subscribe to Scott's channel, Gardener Scott channel, and definitely go and check out his live stream tomorrow morning and learn just a little bit more about hardening off your plants for the season.
Thanks, Enoch. I do appreciate that. And for those who maybe are just discovering you and me on the second Sunday of the month, next month on the second Sunday, we're going to be doing it all over again. So this isn't a one-time deal. We've actually agreed to be doing this over a course of many months. So I'll be back, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you again next month.
Absolutely wonderful. Yeah, again, too, as I tell everybody, Scott's my man. Scott's the guy you turn to if you need to know what's going on in your garden or strategies, all of that sort of stuff. So it's a real blessing for our channel to be able to have you here each and every month for the second Sunday of the month to answer all of your gardening questions. And with that, Scott, we'll see you this next month.
Thanks, Enoch. I'm headed out to the garden.
Head on out to the garden. All right, Scott.
Buddy.
We'll see you. Let's Get Growing is sponsored by IV Organic.
Hi, my name is Charles Malky, biologist and plant expert with IV Organics, where we grow cool plants, and author, Saving the World with the Home Garden. IV Organic 3-in-1 Plant Guard has 7 natural oils that protect your plants, not just from the summer heat as well as winter cold, but also protects your plants from damaging insects and rodents. The oils in the product include castor, cinnamon, clove, garlic, peppermint, rosemary, and spearmint. These oils are natural insect and rodent repellent oils, which are encapsulated by the base powder, offering your plants months of protection at a time. 1 application per year will suffice for protection against damaging summer sunburn and winter sun scald, but if the target is pests, application as much as 2 to 3 times a year may be necessary.
All right. Awesome show today. Again, so awesome for Scott to show up with us each and every month on the second Sunday of the month to answer all of your gardening questions. And just a great conversation today. Again, talking all about getting started with plants indoors, cold season versus warm season crops. We touched on a lot of that there as well too. And hardening off, as I mentioned too, we it's a really important thing that we're going to be looking at doing here in the next coming weeks as we start to move our indoor plant starts outdoors into the garden spaces. So hardening off is a really important part of all of that process. So definitely be sure. We touched on it just a little bit here today on that show, but it's a great reason to go over to Gardener Scott's channel tomorrow morning to check out his shows, and he'll give you a lot more information and a lot more discussion on hardening off your plants. It's just, a great way to get things going for some plants. And as we also talked about there too, there's a lot of plants, and a lot of the things that we grow in our garden can be directly sown out into our garden spaces. But some of our plants and some of our things, like our tomatoes, our peppers, like you mentioned, eggplants, and things like that, ground cherries, another one that I've, getting started too as well this week, are great to get started indoors. So definitely go and check out Scott's channel tomorrow. Learn about how we're going to take those plants from indoors, outdoors into our garden spaces and harden them off. So really, again, a great conversation with Gardener Scott here today, all about that. And let's see here too as well. Again, I want to mention we did have a really great show yesterday with Nicole Smith from Nicole Smith Gardening. I want you to go and check out our Saturday show and check out that fun conversation as well too. And also be sure to join with us next Saturday as well too. We will have with us Ashley Thomas, Mocha Gardener, author of the book How to Become a Gardener. Ashley was a guest on our show this last year. Just a really awesome, wonderful conversation that we got to have on the show. And then when I went to the National Heirloom Exposition this last fall down in Southern California, I got to meet Ashley in person, and we got to have a great conversation there as well at the exposition. So it's going to be really great to have her back on the show again this next week to talk all about our love and passion for gardening and growing and all of that too. So just again, really good reason to make sure that you're subscribed to the channel and all of that as well too. We just passed our 15,000 subscriber mark, which is just amazing for us. Again, I never really imagined when I first started this whole gardening adventure on YouTube that again, you see channels out there that are big, but I never put my mindset into that sort of thing. I just was kind of really happy to just be able to share with everybody how much I love growing and I love gardening, and especially growing food in small spaces like we do on our channel. And it's just been wonderful to see all of the people who have kind of followed along and have joined up with this garden adventure. And to have the number 15,000 for me is just completely amazing. And I thank each and every one of you who have subscribed, and especially all of those of you who come and join with us each and every week here on the Let's Get Growing show, which, I truly believe we've got a great, unique live stream right here on the Urban Gardener channel. I worked really hard to create a nice, fun, show and live stream, a gardening space for all of us to collect together and to discuss and to have conversations with each other throughout the weekends, each and every Saturday and Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific time here. So definitely be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and join with everybody else. And also too, if you're still with us at this moment, hit the like button if you haven't. Click that thumbs up, and as well share with people. Help us build that audience, help us bring more people into this fun gardening community that we have here each and every weekend. So I really appreciate everybody who has come in and joined with us here on the show. And and Jay's 15,000 subscribers. Yes, amazing, really awesome. And again, thank you all so much for being such a big part of this whole gardening adventure for me here. And one other thing you can do too as well in to be a part of our Urban Gardener Let's Get Growing gardening community is you can come and join us in our Facebook group. So if you're on Facebook, come and join. In fact, there's a link right down below in the description with all of our other links where you can come and join with us on Facebook in our Let's Get Growing gardening group, which is a great place for you to be able to go and share all of your gardens. I love to see your pictures, video, whatever you have. I mean, it's really awesome to be able to share everything with all of you through these videos and live streams here on the Urban Gardener channel. But when I get to see all of your gardens in our gardening group, when you guys all share those, it's just really awesome for me as well as everybody else in our community. So definitely go and join up with our gardening group there as well too. Awesome. So again, it was really great to see all of you again this weekend. We've put in a couple of really, really great shows here on yesterday's Saturday show and today's Sunday show. And we will see all of you this very next weekend. So definitely be sure to come and join with us. See you then.